Hello and welcome to No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. It's a matter of great concern that the world's largest democracy, India, finds itself falling on press freedom rankings year after year. We like to pretend we don't care, but we do. This year, India has fallen 8 places to the 150th position out of 180 countries in the annual report put out by the global media watchdog RSF, or Reporters Without Borders. India ranks below Turkey, Libya, Nigeria, the UAE, Rwanda, though we are just ahead of Sudan, Pakistan and Afghanistan. In 2016, India was ranked at 133. That fell to 138 in 2018, 142 in 2020 and 21, and now we are at 150. India's neighbour Nepal, though, has jumped up 30 places to the 76th rank. The countries topping the list are ironically those whose leaders Prime Minister Modi has met over the last couple of days on his foreign tour. Norway is at number 1, Denmark is at 2, and Sweden is at number 3. So what does the report say on India specifically, and why has India's ranking fallen? It says violence against journalists, the politically partisan media, and the concentration of media ownership all demonstrate that press freedom is in crisis in the world's largest democracy. The Prime Minister comes in for some very direct criticism in the report. It says very early on, Modi took a critical stand vis-a-vis journalists, calling them intermediaries, polluting the direct relationship between himself and his supporters. It goes on to say, Indian journalists who are too critical of the government are subjected to all-out harassment and attack campaigns by Modi devotees known as Bhakts. Charges of defamation, sedition, contempt of court and endangering national security are increasingly used against journalists critical of the government who are branded as anti-national. Well, reacting to this World Press Freedom Index, 3 Indian journalist bodies have said in a joint statement that while the job insecurities have grown, so have attacks on press freedoms that have seen an exponential rise. India does not fare too well in this regard, ranking at 150 out of 180. Journalists have been incarcerated under draconian laws for flimsy reasons and on some occasions faced a threat to their lives, as well as from self-styled custodians of the law in the social media space. This was a statement by the Indian Women's Press Corps as well as the Press Club of India and the Press Association. They also noted that freedom of press is integral to the functioning of a vibrant democracy. So is India becoming a dangerous place for journalists? Or should the question be, why has India become a dangerous place for journalists? Joining us on the program tonight, one of India's most well-known journalist voices, Mr. N. Ram, is with us this evening. Joining us as well, Shama Mohammed of the Congress Party, Mr. P.K.D. Nambiar, analyst and supporter of the BJP, Sadanand Dhume, Senior Resident Fellow with the American Enterprise Institute, joining us, and Debjani Bhattacharya, member of the BJP in West Bengal. Let me get to you first, Mr. N. Ram. How disappointed are you to see India's rank consistently fall now for some years? We are at 150. We are behind Turkey now.
Yes, I'm not disappointed. I expected this because I've been following this World Press Freedom Index for a very long time. And if you look at it alongside what the Committee to Protect Journalists, the CPJ, puts out, the killings of the murder of journalists, not just those killed in dangerous assignments or in crossfire, but murdered in connection with their work. I think this index accurately reflects the state of affairs, the state of play for the news media in India. And this year, the Reporters Without Borders, CSF, has struck a new path by defining what press freedom is, and also by getting in experts to tell us, give us political indicators. And if you look at these indicators, there are 5 of them. Political indicator is one where India is characterized as difficult. The situation is difficult. Economic indicator, very serious. Legislative indicator, problematic. Social indicator, problematic. And worst of all, perhaps, security indicator, very serious. And I think this accurately reflects the situation on the ground. There's no question about it. The murders of journalists have increased since 2014. These are the objective figures. We have the whole list of journalists who have been murdered in connection with the work. And what is most distressing, Nidhi, is we also figured from the start in the Global Impunity Index put out by the Committee to Protect Journalists, which means that journalists are murdered in connection with their work and not a single case has been resolved. So we have been a founding and permanent member of this club of shame, which is why I think RSF now says that India is one of the most dangerous places in the world for journalists, particularly small town reporters.
Exactly. Mr. Nambiar, just wanted to ask you, we haven't heard from the government on this latest report, but in Parliament late last year, the INB minister had rejected the findings of the last report and basically said that the centre doesn't agree, that the sample size was too small, that the methodology was questionable and non-transparent. Now, this seems to be a pattern with the Indian government where whenever a report comes out which adversely speaks of anything, whether it's to do with the economy or a democracy index or now this RSF report, the first thing we do is question everybody else's methodology. But aren't you concerned that India is finding itself on this list year after year going down and the company we find ourselves in is rather alarming?
Nidhi, well, I'm going to disappoint you even today, because the reason being that I definitely do question such kind of reports, because these are very, very motivated just to tarnish the very image of an India or the countries like which are growing powers. So it's basically a new weapon of a kind of a new weapon which the West is using to malign the overall perception about a superpower, like an emerging superpower like India, and there is no doubt. I'll give you examples of one after another. So imagine like a Moldova, a country which is just next to the Ukraine, for an example, is into, I think the 40 is the rank. And imagine that the Russian channels were banned in that particular country way back, more than 1.5 to 2 years before. Not even, there was nothing, there was no Ukraine-Russia war there. Imagine Hong Kong, which from the last 2 years, even in your own channel has reported multiple times, almost all the media has been taken over by the China. But it ranks almost, I think, in 76. A kingdom which is owned or a king ruled United Arab Emirates, UAE, which is in the much ahead of us. So the idea of these kind of ranks are basically to create an image and an impression that India as a country, which is, of course, as you said, which is the largest democracy in the world, wherein every press, even today we are talking about, and Mr. Ram was talking about, I'm a great fan of Hindu, sir, but let me tell you, even today's Hindu, as a newspaper, every day publish various news, not only just news, even editorial articles about the anti-establishment. And that is the job of the...
But that's what the media is supposed to do. I know that people have forgotten that, but the media is supposed to be, it's supposed to question the establishment. But can I ask you, Mr. Nambiar, you know, the conspiracy theory aside that you have, that this is to malign India's image, but is it not true that journalists are increasingly finding themselves slapped with sedition charges? Siddique Kappan has been in jail because he went to cover the Hathras incident more than a year ago. There are journalists from Jammu and Kashmir who are facing UAPA charges for reporting from there. The press has been completely muzzled there. Is this not true? Has this not happened?
Nidhi, we are a large country, and of course a large amount of press is also present in this country. If you really look at the percentage of the number of people who may have gone behind the bars, and please note, even if it is, if at all, if there is some of the cases, I'm just saying that according to me, there is, all the cases are very genuine. But even if somebody questioned on some of those cases, for an example, the Hathras case, which I said, we have complete proof that he is actually a terror mind in a way. So, but the problem is that why do we need to take these very small examples to tarnish the image of a country like us? That is too small. Imagine whom are you comparing with? You are comparing with the Sudan. You are comparing with the third world countries, which are predominantly kingdoms.
Okay. And you're saying they're not democracies, they're dictatorships, and we find ourselves in their company, which is exactly what I'm saying as well. Shama Mohammed, you wanted to comment. Go ahead.
No, Nidhi, according to Mr. PKT Nambiar, before 2014, we were not a great democracy. We were nobody. Let me remind him that we were a democracy which had an average GDP of 8.9, not what we are having right now. And in 2010, our ranking was 122. From there, in 10 years, we have reached 150. And in 89 shutdowns, internet shutdowns in 2021. Now he blames right now, he says the West is going after India because we are a growing democracy. But let's show him proof, the evidence. 89 internet shutdowns in 2021. 67 journalists arrested. 200 journalists attacked. 10 sedition cases against 3 journalists of the Caravan. Now let's also remember last year on the 26th of January, a protester died on a tractor. The police said the tractor overturned. His family said he was shot dead. They saw it. 5 journalists reported that. What happened to them? Sedition charges against them. So I want to know, why are you putting sedition charges against journalists who were reporting what the family said? So what is happening in this country? Increase of sedition charges after 2014, 90 times more, not just 10 times or 20 times. So what is happening in this country? Why is this happening is a question we need to answer today. It is because the Prime Minister himself does not take press conferences. He has an image to protect, and nobody, like Nidhi said, this is a democracy. This is not a dictatorship. And why are you condemning something like Reporters Sans Frontier, a very well-known organization around the world, you know, which is the biggest reporting by the media? What happened before 2014 called India Against Corruption. There is corruption in the Congress party. There is corruption in the Congress party. I want to ask today, where is that corruption? What happened? You know, who went to jail for the alleged coal scam? Who went to jail for the alleged 2G, where the Supreme Court came out and said there is no scam? So that, in fact, we should be putting our foot down and saying what happened before 2014 when the government was questioned. And now every day the opposition is questioned. Why are matters not there?
Okay, before I get Mr. Nambiar to respond to those points, Sadanand Dhume, do come in, because there's a popular narrative that plays out here, especially on social media, which is one that, oh, we don't care about these rankings, but we do because we're tweeting about them and we're trying to diss them. But we also had reports last year when the press freedom rankings actually first fell to 142, that the Indian government went out of its way to actually lobby with the RSF and say that, look, no, actually we're really a good democracy and our press freedom rankings are really not so bad. So clearly we do care.
So, Nidhi, I have a somewhat different take from your, other speakers over here. I think that, it's possible to separate RSF and their reporting on press freedom and the issue of press freedom in India. So let me point out that I'm not a big fan of the RSF report. I don't think that they have a particularly good grasp of what is going on in India. I think that they have a tendency to basically take an overview of the world that in ways looks quite ridiculous. For example, the fact that India is placed right above Turkey. I mean, Turkey is a country where there are literally thousands of journalists who are in jail because Erdogan essentially runs an authoritarian state. So I think you can make a lot, you can really sort of, I think it's fair to question the RSF methodology. It's fair to question their ability to really take an overview of what is happening in the world and place countries in perspective properly. So I'm not a fan of the report. However, I would say that any neutral observer watching the situation in India would acknowledge that there has been a decline in press freedom quite precipitously since 2014. This is not to say that things were wonderful before 2014, right? As you pointed out, or as someone else pointed out, India was 122nd. That's not something to be greatly proud of. It's not as though everything was wonderful, but there has been a decline. The third point I want to make is that part of the problem with judging India is that it is so large and so diverse that some of the complexity gets left out. So, for example, it could be really, really hard to be a small town reporter in Madhya Pradesh, say, reporting on a local mining mafia, right? There could be a real sort of danger to your life. However, you could be writing a column in English for the Telegraph in which you criticize the Prime Minister, and you'd be okay. So it's just much more complex than what the report manages to capture. their reliance on sort of a very small group of, researchers and experts.
I don't agree on
this.
this.
To muddle it, and so it's just sort of it's not particularly subtle.
Okay, with Sadanand, you've managed to get everyone wants to come in on what you said.
Can I just make one last point before they come in? So I'll just give you an example of sort of why I think that this has always been a bit problematic, right? Like Mr. N. Ram is on this panel. I remember in the 1980s, there were only two newspapers that really had courage. His newspaper with the reporting on Bofors and the Indian Express. So India has not had a great record, number one. However, that despite, things have gone from bad to worse. I think that is my second point. And the third point is we should be able to have this discussion divorced from RSF, because RSF is really not doing a very good job in my view.
Okay, Mr. Ram, give me a second.
A fact check.
Quickly, yes, before I come to Devjani, yes.
Because he said Turkey, thousands of the journalists are in jail. I just looked up the RSF index. 9 journalists are in jail and nobody has been killed in 2022. Unlike in India, 2021 was a very bad year.
I'm going to come to this point. I'll come back to this point.
It's not correct. We must be accurate on these things.
In just a sec, I'll come back to this. Devjani Bhattacharya, I'll just read out to you what has happened with some examples of what's happening to journalists in this country. In July of 2021 in Madhya Pradesh, a journalist named Tanveer Warsi, who was reporting on ICU ceilings that were leaking and faulty ventilators during COVID, was jailed for 5 months for that story. In Jammu and Kashmir, recently, a website editor, Fahad Shah, was arrested in one case. He got bail. He was arrested before he could come out of jail. He got bail again. And then before he could get bail in the third case that he was arrested for, he was slapped with the Public Safety Act in J&K, which means now he can't come out at least for the next 1 year. Meanwhile, you had sedition cases against Rajdeep Sardesai, Mrinal Pandey, Vinod Jose over the farmers' protest reporting, which the Supreme Court threw out. Scroll editor Supriya Sharma was booked over her reports on COVID in Varanasi last year in June. Siddiq Kappan, I've already said, has been in jail for some 19 months. In UP, 66 journalists have faced 138 criminal cases in the last 5 years. 48 journalists have been physically attacked in the last 5 years. These are all real people, real statistics, Devjani Bhattacharya. I actually agree with Sadanand Dhume. Forget RSF's rankings for a minute. Are you not concerned about the situation?
Yes, Nidhi, I agree with you that whenever you were giving me the statistics, the fortunate part is that we all know about this news. This is a part of the freedom of press, that we are being reported all the news against establishment. In all these states, wherever the government, the present ruling dispensation is there, and we are receiving all negative news from all those states, this is an indicator of the freedom of press, not the curbed freedom. But yes, I agree that the freedom of press has been curbed. Whenever you talk of freedom of press being curbed, Arnab Goswami's picture from outside the police van comes in the visual. And it comes in the visual, the picture of West Bengal, when the News 18 reporters and Anandabajar Patrika reporters are beaten black and blue while they were reporting false voting on the ground.
Don't disagree with any of those examples. Don't disagree at all. I don't think Arnab Goswami should have been arrested.
Nidhi, I want to tell you only one thing, one contradiction in the report of RSF. In the first thing, they say that in India it is 1 lakh newspapers, including 36,000 weeklies and 380 TV channels. But at the same time, it says that the abundance of media outlets conceals tendencies towards the concentration of ownership, with only a handful of sprawling media companies at the national level, including the Times Group, HT Media Limited, the Hindu Group, and Network 18. So they are saying that it is concentrated on these 4 media houses. On the other hand, the same report says in the next paragraph that 70 media outlets are owned by Mukesh Ambani, who is a friend of Modi, and 80 million people follow these newspapers these 70 media outlets.
Nidhi,
however,
can we come in?
1 second, let her finish.
All those 4 media houses which we named, None of them are like owned by Mukesh Ambani. In spite of that, the report also said that the media is concentrated on these four. Don't we find this self-contradictory? How is it possible that
all right, let me get Shama Mohammed to come in, and then Mr. Ram.
At the same time, non-Mukesh Ambani media are the four houses which the concentration.
Okay, Shama Mohammed, please come in. Yes, you had to say something. Shama, go ahead.
Disconnected. The volume is gone.
Oh, I think she's lost the line. Mr. Ram, I just wanted your response largely to what Sadanand was saying. About the credibility of the RSF and its methodology. And that doesn't take away, as he put it, from the fact that press freedom in India is certainly on the decline.
It is true that you need to go deeper into issues like concentration and so on, but I think it is true. It's clear that there is a tendency towards concentration, monopolization, or duopolization in some language markets. There's no doubt about it. At the same time, I also believe there is plenty of space in India, I agree, to resist, to dissent and so on. So this battle is going on. It is true that we are able to put out, I'm able to speak here. NDTV is coming out in a very objective way, not afraid to criticize, but also taking positions where it can also support on issues that is good journalism. So I think there is space. We don't have to compare this with the emergency or with the worst dictatorship and so on, but compared with what we had 30, 40 years ago. There was a time I remember I used to claim India was in an enviable position so far as freedom of the press was concerned. But if I said this today, I would be laughed out of court. I'd be accused of probably disinformation.
Shama Mohammed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring in a very important point is you have channels like Media One, which speaks the truth in Kerala, suppressed. There was a case against them. They were taken off air without any reason because they are anti-state activities was said against them. But at the same time, you have channels like Sudarshan TV. You have Republic who spews hate every other day against a particular community. I mean, where is press freedom here? So what they don't like is suppressed and what they like is kept out. And she talked about a particular journalist from Republic or an anchor. Arnab got his bail from Supreme Court. Siddiq Kappan is still lying there with UAPA charges. On what basis? There is no evidence against him. And he has got UAPA charges for the last 2 years. So this is not justified, Nidhi. The problem right now is all, except maybe NDTV and some other, everybody has to toe the line of what the government wants to tell the people. There is no other way. If they don't, there is ED, there is, even NDTV had that experience. They send income tax, they send various appendages to these places. That is the problem. The threat, they call you up and say, they threaten you and say, you have to toe the line. You have to have 5 reporters which toe a line. One can be on the other side. That was not what was happening before 2014. You are in the media, you know exactly. Why this sort of, undeclared emergency in this country? That is the problem.
PKD
those days it was declared. This is an undeclared emergency in India right now.
PKD Nambiar, undeclared emergency, strong words from Shama Mohammed. But can I ask you very honestly, that when you look at what we call, what is famously now known as Godi media, which by the way also makes a reference, is made a reference to in this report. Can I ask you honestly that when you watch some of these TV channels, not asking any difficult questions of the government, not doing any television debates on stuff that should matter, like, the economy, what the RBI governor said today, where the jobs are, all the rest of it. And every day, all they do is loudspeaker, is Hindutva under threat, and, what a lovely shawl the Prime Minister is wearing. I mean, do you not cringe, honestly, a little bit that they've just taken it too far?
Well, Nidhi, I must tell you that today the television is not just the media which works in this country. There is a new media which is online media wherein everyone is a journalist and throwing their opinion. On the other hand, yes, I do agree with that television media has become quite a bit of biased. It is not because of any government per se, whether it is any state government or a national government. It is predominantly because of their business compulsion and the breaking news. A few days ago, I was attending a conference where I met many anchors and many of the media personalities. They were all talking about that it is out of their compulsion they are supposed to do it. So I think criticizing any government, whether it is because we have a large number of regional media So they are the state governments do play a major role on those people. But yes, indeed, our freedom of press is in danger. To whom? The problem is that there has been a character in this country which has been created, a left coterie of media groups who are setting the everyday narrative in this country. They are in danger because they will not be allowed to put the narrative which they wanted to tarnish the image of this country will not work. Today, you also need to understand, while we are talking about it, the Foreign Correspondents Club and also the Press Club of India has not given an opportunity, despite after the confirmation to Vivek Ranjan Agnihotri, and neither are not given the opportunity to address the press conference. Now he had to arrange another venue at Le Meridien. Neither Shama Mohammed, not any.
I'm sure that would have been tough for him to arrange an alternative venue. They're well within their rights not to give their platform.
For him to incite hate, Mr. PKD Nambiar.
Anyway, this debate is not about Vivek Agnihotri. This debate is not about him. I have to end it there. But yeah, I would like to sort of end with the question that nobody asked in the course of this show, which is that Prime Minister Modi has been Prime Minister now for 8 years and he has not held a single press conference even now. He's not the only leader, by the way. If you look at many of our regional leaders, our chief ministers, many of them are actually averse to having a free and open relationship with the press. That includes Mamata Banerjee, that includes many other leaders who do not hold themselves accountable. And it was very much the same even in the Congress regime, although Dr. Manmohan Singh, yes, did do regular press conferences, at least whenever he was flying in and out of the country. But yes, if the BJP says it's different, we still haven't had a free-for-all chance to interact with the Prime Minister. Will that change before the next election? I don't know. I don't expect it. But it is something that's to be put out there. Thanks for joining us tonight. Good night.